The Philadelphia 76ers have dropped another game, this time at the hands of the Sacramento Kings. That was the final matchup of their West Coast trip, and they will return home for a matchup against the Los Angeles Clippers tomorrow. Will be James Harden's return to Philadelphia, and we will see what warm welcome is waiting for him there. But the bottom line is the Sixers have some internal issues to fix. In last night's game against the Sacramento Kings, it was the Tyrese Maxey show early on. He scored the first 16 points that the Sixers did score. They held a lead 16-15 at that point. Maxey ultimately ran out of gas, and the team kind of sunk down in the process, and it just kind of exposes the reality of what this team is right now. But over the recent play, there has been one positive that I do think is worth taking, and that is the play of Cameron Payne. That this is a guy that I've been very impressed by and very surprised by based on my expectations for him when he first came to the Sixers. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to start by introducing how Cam Payne got here. He, of course, was traded to the Sixers along with a second-round pick in exchange for Patrick Beverley. Now, I'll be the first one to throw my hand up and say that I was a little too judgmental of that trade. That was a trade that I was very against when it first happened. I liked having Patrick Beverley on the Sixers team. He is a guy that I still believe in to be a high-level playoff performer, a guy that can spot you those minutes. And for the record, my debate here is never who's the straight-up better basketball player. There is areas of his game which Cam Payne is definitely better than Pat Bev. What my argument has always been is that for the playoff rotation, when you're looking for those 12 to 15 minutes from a backup point guard, from a guard to play these type of minutes, I still think Pat Bev is going to be more impactful than Cam Payne. But where this conversation kind of changes is because that's the Kyle Lowry role. And I do want to talk a little bit about playoff expectations, the rotation, and if I think Cam Payne is a guy that cracks that. But I do want to highlight specifically what he's done of late. That to take a look at his game log, coming off a matchup in which he scored 23 points against the Los Angeles Clippers, made a huge impact, knocking down 5 3-pointers in that game. And that's not the first time that he has exploded. I thought he was solid last night with 8 points and 6 assists. There is a little juice off the dribble that he does possess. And he does have all these double-finger scoring performances, having 12 points against the Suns, 10 points, 13 points, 13 points, 16 points, 15 points, 13, 16, 15, and 20 in his debut way back when. These are numbers that we were not expecting to see from Cam Payne, and I think it is worth noting that this dude is legitimate as an offensive weapon. There is a little more that he brings to the table. And to compare him directly to Pat Bev and what these two do bring to the table, I like what Cam Payne is providing this team. That you can see the offensive numbers significantly off the chart for Cam Payne in comparison here. The three-point percentage, the field goal percentage. Of course, Pat Bev, a lot of the advanced metrics with the win shares and things like that sway in his favor, and there is good reason for that. For Cam Payne specifically, I will say the defense is probably even worse than advertised, and that's my biggest concern with him. A lot of it not being his fault, that he's slight of frame, one of these smaller guys on the floor, and anytime an opposing team gets the opportunity, they're taking him directly to the post and punishing the Sixers for it. That's just matchup basketball. That is as expected, and you always got to take the good and bad with players, but there's been way more good with Cam Payne than I expected to this point. And to his credit, this has mostly been him for the entirety of his career. That if we want to take a look at his stats in general, having a bit of a, I guess, outlier season, one would say, but not entirely, as this is just about what his good seasons do look like. In the 21 games that he has played with the Sixers so far, averaging 10.5 points, 3.2 assists, 1.6 rebounds, shooting 37.1% from three, just above his career average of 36.8%. And this is a guy with a more proven track record that you can see all the experience that is on his resume. He's played in playoff games. Cam Payne is a better player than a lot of us perceived him to be when coming to Philadelphia. Now, for Cam Payne specifically, this still brings up the question of the deadline moves as a whole. And Cam Payne and Buddy Hield, I don't think either were quite the stars that we were hoping for. There was so much promise with these draft picks, the big names that we were hoping for. Obviously, the Joel Embiid injury has kind of derailed that process, and we're just still awaiting the timeline and expectations for when Joel Embiid will be returning to the floor. I will note at the time of recording this today on March 26th that we are officially 7 weeks post-surgery of Joel Embiid. So the expectation was that this is a 6 to 8 week recovery. That would lead us to believe that his return should be coming soon. And by the way, I will make a quick note here that Joel Embiid is absolutely returning for the Sixers team, that I don't want to hear the noise if it's not worth it or what's the point or anything like that. Here's what we do know. There is a limited number of playoff runs that we will have under Joel Embiid, particularly healthy playoff runs. The Sixers were absolutely in the contending category, in the top 6 to 8 teams across the entire league when Joel Embiid was healthy and playing his best basketball at the start of the season. Come playoff time, and we have not seen the highest level of Joel Embiid in the playoffs to this point. We've not seen the healthiest version of Joel Embiid to this point. This is a route where you can have an opportunity to see that. Assuming that the medicals check out, that he looks completely healed, doctors are all signed up, and he's good to go, you throw him out there and see what happens. And when talking about this Sixers team, they're going to look a whole lot better when the reigning MVP of the league and one of the top 5 basketball players in the entire world is back there on the floor. And this is where I want to talk about the entire fit of this roster. So to bring up the depth chart here, obviously no Joel Embiid in this conversation, but the current starters most likely being Tyrese Maxey, Kyle Lowry, Kelly Oubre, Tobias Harris, Mo Bamba in there for now. Obviously, Joel Embiid would bump him out in this situation. And then looking a bit at the second unit, guys like Cam Payne, guys like Nico Batum, Paul Reed. And by the way, Oubre was a guy who the Sixers missed significantly last night in that Kings game. Oubre is a guy that is now cemented as a surefire part of this rotation, a significant part of this team, and a guy that I think when he's back to a little bit more minimized role than he's currently playing, he's going to be incredibly effective. That I'm ready to roll the red carpet out and pound the table, that I want Kelly Oubre Jr. back in a Sixers uniform next year. But I did want to speak more about the guard conversation. So we know what Joel Embiid brings, and when comparing these guys, that it's pretty clear that each player on this list is maximized when Joel Embiid is on the floor. A player like Buddy Hield, that there's going to be significantly more open three-point looks when Joel Embiid is on the floor. When the teams are attracted to doubling down and tripling down on him in the post, that is where players like Buddy Hield. And Buddy has to play better than he has been. He did leave last night's game with a foot injury, said that the foot injury is something that's been bothering him for a couple days now. So hopefully he's resting up, getting back to 100%. This is another situation where I think it's best to shut him down, whatever the issue is, get it fixed, and then have him kind of on the same page as Joel when they return to the floor. I don't expect it to be anything serious, but I do think that is worth noting and important to be taken care of now. And then when you talk about the guard rotation, obviously Tyrese Maxey being the focal point now, that he has ascended to the secondary star role for the Sixers team. Kyle Lowry has been the guy that has impressed me a ton, that he does have more left in the tank than I expected. You still see the limitations at times, and frankly, I think a lot of it has more to do with the mentals than the physicals, that I think he's been a little overly passive in the Sixers offense. I think he's trying to be calculated, be a team-first player where he is deferring to guys, but there's moments where Kyle can absolutely take over, and the shot is still there. There are flashes where you see the offensive production. That is the guy that I will call the Patrick Beverley upgrade, more so than Cam Payne. But with Cam Payne, he's kind of the third-tier guy in that. And I don't think that Cam Payne cracks the official playoff rotation. What I do think is he's a guy that can light you on fire for stretches at a time, and there will be a couple playoff games in which that'll be necessary. So you got to think when it comes playoff time that things shrink down to where you are pulling out your top 8 or 9. And when you look at this depth chart, obviously Joel Embiid is 1 on here. Tyrese Maxey is 2. Tobias Harris, unfortunately, is 3. Kyle Lowry and Kelly Oubre both cracked that list. Buddy Hield cracks that list. Paul Reed, Nico Batum, I think, deserves it. We're already talking about 8 guys right there. And even if we want to bring up a player that has not received a ton of buzz and a guy that I'm very high on, more so than I would say the public, that's Robert Covington. That I think Covington absolutely deserves a spot in this rotation, assuming he's healthy. And we're hearing more positive signs that he will be returning the floor, at least more so than we've heard with Joel Embiid. That is a notable addition to this team in my mind, especially when you talk about potential matchups with teams like the Boston Celtics, things like that. That's the highest level wing that will be on this roster, and they should unveil him. But for Cam Payne specifically, I do think there's going to be opportunities come playoff time where he is the light the world on fire guy, where they need a change of pace. They need a spark off the bench, and that is the role that I'm seeing becoming his thing. That will be especially vital for the entirety of the regular season, particularly as they navigate this shorthanded stretch. And the bottom line is he's proven capable, that he has answered these calls. He's stepping up in a way that I think very few expected, and it feels like there's a bit of a chip on his shoulder in a way that I did not expect to see. There is some grit. There is some nastiness. And even though the form looks whack, they'll completely turn the other direction, shoots it like a toddler, but you know what? It goes in. And that excites me about Cam Payne. So I've been really impressed with everything that he's bringing to the table. I think my ultimate outlook for him is that he's likely a guy not on the everyday rotation come playoff time, but I'm very impressed and think he's bringing far more to this team than I expected. And frankly, a guy that is very much on a tryout, and I wouldn't fully mind having back in a Sixers uniform next year. Obviously, far more priorities that you have to get in check and see how the rest of the roster shapes out at that point. But I'm warming up to the idea of Cam Payne sticking in Philadelphia for a little bit. He's obviously a guy that has bounced around the NBA thus far in his career and looking for a home. And he seems well liked. I like the energy. I like the spark. You constantly see him dancing, celebrating, and on court, it's been very good. So I want to see if you guys are on the same page as me. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think of Cam Payne. Is this a guy that you can see in the long term? Do you think he can crack the playoff rotation or anything else you got on your mind? So thank everybody for watching this video. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button, dropping a like, and dropping your thoughts. I'll be talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.